Hi folks, welcome to Monday's I Write Radio podcast stroke videocast. Today we're going to go with the EU budget. Jimmy would like to talk on that. And the latest SNP Civil War. I think there's probably more than one or two going on at the moment. So we'll start with the EU. Jimmy.
Hang on a minute, I'm actually here as well. You haven't introduced me, mate.
I'm really sorry, Stuart. Nobody can see you, of course.
No, they can't. The podcast.
Stuart Lockhead's here, as he pointed out.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Stuart.
And Jimmy Hutton.
And Jimmy's here as well. I think that's a veiled criticism, Stuart. Right, back to topic. We're going to chat about the EU. We'll let Jimmy get on with that. James.
Aye, Norry. I think it was noticeable, probably noticeable by its absence in the UK press, but without the usual rigmarole and infighting and months of negotiation, the EU has approved its budget for the next 6 years. They also, at the same time as doing that, concluded discussion on a massive stimulus package for the EU to fight COVID. And whilst people are still crunching the numbers, the bare number for Scotland, had we still been a member of the EU and not been dragged out against our will, is that we would have got roughly about 2.5 billion more from Brussels than London has so far furnished us with. So that would have been an extra shed load of spending that Edinburgh could have done on our behalf, and a shed load of spending that frankly Edinburgh would have been free to make more decisions on than it is with the small amounts of money that get chucked at us from London that we're meant to be eternally grateful for. I just find it interesting that they've done this. You know, there's clearly disagreements in Europe with how Poland have voted, how Poland's acting, how Hungary is reacting. But they still managed to sit around a table, work out a budget for the next few years and act in the best interests of all EU citizens. There's a couple of interesting things I'll need to get into deeper. They've taken more fiscal powers for central EU use, and they will be issuing EU bonds, which I believe is the first time that they're going to do this. But then, given the strength of the EU and the strength of certain economies within it, i.e. Germany, those bonds will fly off the shelves, perhaps slightly different to the way that the UK have done things by the Bank of England introducing 300 billions worth of quantitative easing and buying up 300 billions worth of UK debt with that quantitative easing.
I just give loads of money to the rich.
Aye, exactly. George Kerrivan had a nice piece about that this morning where he effectively compared it to the 2008-2010 bailout, where financial inequality increased massively in this country, and he's saying that the quantitative easing that the Bank of England's done will do exactly the same thing. The rich will, again, get considerably richer, and it's your normal punters like us that'll end up paying the price for that.
This, what did you say, 2.8 billion that was earmarked for Scotland, was that earmarked for Scotland? Or
No, it was about 5.9 billion that would have come to us, given the financial settlements that we've had in the past from Brussels.
So it was directly money for Scotland. It wasn't going via Westminster.
Effectively, it was directly for Scotland, mate. I think some of it would have went via Westminster, but as usual with European funding, it's got pretty tight curtailments on what they can do with it.
No, I was just thinking of our hill farmers, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
150
million.
back.
Aye, that took, what was that, about 4 years or something before that finally showed up.
And a lot of pressure.
Aye, and then it was, they claimed that this was new money. It was EU money that they'd snaffled.
Yeah.
Yeah, it also brings in the thing about the Brexit negotiations, Norry, because if Europe have shown that regardless of political differences, and there are considerable differences between the likes of the French and the Dutch and the Hungarians and the Poles, they sit down around a table and hammer this thing out, and they do it in a far lesser timescale, because Britain doesn't have people there saying, no, you can't do that, and you certainly can't do that. It makes you wonder whether they'll actually...
There was a piece in, I think it was the Times, when these talks first started, basically saying, oh, now we're going to see what Europe's really like. This is going to take months and months and months.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you begin to wonder if Britain was the problem.
Yeah.
So,
aye, certainly when you look back to past budget negotiations, and they dragged on and on and on, and you had, God, endless midnight summits with midnight meetings and what have you, and this seems to have done, admittedly, bringing out the stimulus package on the back of COVID might have focused the negotiations somewhat, but not having Britain in the room whining about rebates and telling people that you can't possibly spend this or that there seems to have helped them considerably.
Maybe they'll be delighted to see the back years.
That's what I'm thinking, mate. They might just give us a wee wave. Jean-Michel Barnier will be standing on the French equivalent of the White Cliffs of Dover going, ram it, see you later.
Who exactly, what countries are we actually expecting to do trade with? Because things are going badly with the USA, going badly with Europe. They've decided to have a go at China, and they're having a go at Russia. Who the hell are we supposed to trade with?
It's all right. We can trade with England, they tell me.
Aye, Scotland shouldn't worry, because we can trade with England, and England will be able to trade with Singapore, Australia, Canada, and possibly Burundi, I believe.
Have they not got a cracking deal with
Liechtenstein?
That's the one. Yeah.
That's fabulous for the City of London, though, because there's an awful lot of strange banking practices going in Liechtenstein and Luxembourg and that, isn't there?
Yep.
That's maybe why it got done so quickly.
Right, that's right.
Can't have dirty money polluting the streets.
No, you've got to hide the dirty money as quick as possible, when they can't hide it on Belfast. Come on, I mean.
Oh. Barbed comment there, James. Okay, EU's doing well. There's been another explosion. There's been another explosion in SNP ranks today. Stuart, you want to start off on this one?
Yeah, well, first of all, before we get into the meat, we've also discovered today that the SNP keep a file on obnoxious members. And you might need to have to go, there is a way you can find out if you are detailed as an obnoxious member. So I'm thinking that something I may be about to say might get me qualified in that department.
Well, I think maybe before you say anything, there has been an accusation that the SNP have a file on obnoxious members. Would be more accurate.
I'd take great offence to anyone calling me an obnoxious member, or any slight change in the wording.
So you didn't actually see the Alan Smith video then of him saying it?
That's not a member, mate. That was...
yes, I did see it, and that's not what he said.
Okay, fair enough.
Do you know what I mean?
She wasn't a member, mate. She's a constituent that has previous for, in her words, asking questions that canvassers can't answer.
Very good. I'd like to go and do that. I need to go and find it. Next time they're at the bottom of the foot of the walk.
I'll be honest with you, mate. If somebody turns up at my door, I didn't really want to question them. I'm more like, damn, I wish I hadn't answered the door. But particularly when it's canvassers for political parties.
No, that's true.
Right.
Anyway, we've got another stooshy which started this morning because James Matthews, who's one of the hyena pack of Scottish so-called journalists, decided to publish a piece that he's obviously been had hanging around for quite a while. Seems to decide now is the time, which accuses Sturgeon of telling lies in the Holyrood Parliament. A matter of 3 days. It's about the difference between the 2nd of April and the 29th of March 2018, when whether she did or not know about Salmon being accused of sexual harassment.
Mhm.
However, we subsequently discovered, courtesy of Craig Murray, that Matthews seems to have missed an open goal. I know. I actually know, I read that Matthews' article, and I was thinking, he's muttering here about a meeting on the 29th of March. Surely he's saying in his article that Sturgeon must have known on the the 9th of March. Surely he's saying in this article that she must have known about this, but I kind of brushed over it. But Craig Murray highlights it, so she's now looking like in a pretty shaky place. But whether this will come up in the coming inquiry and when it starts, when do we get to know anything? The 6th of August?
No,
Right.
no, the written submissions to the parliamentary inquiry close on the 4th of August. At that point, normally those written submissions would be published, but we are probably going to see some redactions, obviously, because of the alphabet women, and any submissions that might have names or anything that could possibly identify them. The actual inquiry starts on the 18th, so we should see those written submissions early August, and then boom, on the 18th we get all the big wooden spoons into the big pile of doo-doo, and they all start stirring.
I think the first point I'm going to make here is that the press and the opposition will conflate two different things. There will be the idea that anything Nicola Sturgeon discussed when Alex Salmon's name came up shouldn't have been, or should have been, or maybe's aye, maybe's no, made public. What's happening and what is going to happen here is the opposition are going to want to know, they're going to want sight of every piece of paper that had Alex Salmon's name on it, regardless if it had anything to do with the Scottish government. They're going to want to know internal SNP discussions.
Mhm.
And that's going to get conflated with Scottish government discussions. It's already happened. I mean, Sturgeon admitted she'd had a meeting, I can't remember the dates, and this was months ago, admitted in Parliament she'd had a meeting to discuss SNP policy with regards to the Salmon court case. There will be, by the press and the opposition, a joining together of what is SNP party policy meetings and what are government Scottish government meetings. And we should be aware of this.
Oh, you're right. They're just, as I say, mate, they're just going to stir a big pot full of doo-doo and then fling it at a fan and hope that some of it sticks somewhere so that they can, basically they're after scalps. And they're not particularly after scalps to get to the truth. What they're really after is political scalps. They're desperate to get some political meat in amongst all this.
The opposition are going to open the door. If they go down the route I think they're going to do, which is to look to get as much information about what is essentially private SNP party documents, etc. Once that door's open, we can start screaming for all the information about Carmichael that the Liberal Party discussed, all the information about every single pervert the Tory Party's ever produced, and on and on and on. Once that door's open, I've got a sneaky feeling that the opposition parties will regret it.
I'm just trying to think what Stu Campbell was saying this morning in his article, which is he got a letter from the Lord Advocate. He's suggesting in his article that because there is still a court order hanging over the exposure of the names of these alphabet women, that one of the key documents won't see the light of day.
I hesitate to suggest that if the Lord Advocate withholds any documentation, he should lose his job. It's a parliamentary inquiry. as parliamentarians, I don't think there is anywhere on a parliamentary inquiry that they should be blocked from going. It should be their decisions. It should be the chair of the parliamentary inquiry that sets the remit, not the Lord Advocate. At the end of the day, the Lord Advocate, like everyone else, is a civil servant.
The parliamentary inquiry will not be allowed documentation without names being redacted.
Oh, very well. Aye, absolutely, mate. I would think that the names ought to be redacted, but there shouldn't be any documentation that they don't have access to.
I think the way that Wings put it was he'd already discovered that Hamza Yusuf, the Justice Secretary, is denying that he's responsible. The Lord Advocate, who strictly is responsible to the Justice Secretary, is denying he's responsible. So who is responsible?
Well, in fairness, Wings has really answered his own question, because the Lord Advocate stepped down because of his personal involvement from some aspects of this.
He recused himself.
Hamza Yusuf basically did the same because he obviously knew Salmond. The problem is not that they recused themselves as they should have done. It was nobody was then given responsibility for the areas they couldn't be responsible due to recusing themselves. And that has led to what looks like an opportune muddying of the waters.
It suits the high hegians at the Scottish government, whether they're SNP party members or civil servants.
It does, but what it should point out is that they're not going to be allowed to muddy the waters on this. If the parliamentary inquiry feels that the waters are being muddied, they are quite within their rights to instruct Hamza Yusuf as a member of that parliament to appoint somebody to give them access to the information that they require.
Guys, I'm going to do what I always do here. You've both made a presumption that muddying the waters suits them. You've already decided that there is guilt there.
No, I'm not deciding there's guilt. I'm deciding that there has to be clarity on this. And if there's no clarity, then the parliamentary inquiry team and the head of that team, I believe it's Linda Fabiani, are obligated to make sure that there is clarity.
Well, there'll be areas there won't be clarity. I mean, one of the big problems that there's going to be with this is that accusation. The Scottish government is going to get accused of controlling the judiciary, and that is not going to be the case. This is going to be one huge stramash.
It is, mate, aye.
Because there are areas, as happens every week at First Minister's Questions, she is asked to interfere in areas she's not allowed to interfere in. And this will be just a bigger version of that.
There's no real, I mean,
aspects of it.
There's still some dispute, shall we say, as to how much influence Whitehall has over the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service in Scotland, because they do have influence. At the end of the day, if you're a judge, if you're a sheriff in Scotland and you want to be a High Court judge, your appointment requires you to impress both Edinburgh and London, because judicial appointments, particularly at a very senior level, they're not going to happen if Whitehall aren't happy with them.
I don't know enough about this.
Yeah, but I think that's
bluntly. I just don't know enough.
I think that's deliberate, Norry. I've tried to look into it a couple of times, and just by just through online searching and that, it's very difficult to find out where Edinburgh's responsibility for the judiciary stops and London's begins. And I think that's deliberate.
Do you remember when it was quite 20 years ago? We discovered that to get anywhere in the BBC, you had to be approved by MI5. Now, I know that to do any job at Holyrood, you have to be approved by MI5. probably even making the tea.
Aye, interestingly, I read
Um,
something. I read something this weekend. I didn't go into it, but I believe that Michael Gove's department is now taking responsibility for vetting in the United Kingdom. Certainly, it's been a responsibility of another department up till now, but Gove is now taking control of that, which is an interesting wee London power grab.
you would have thought it would be a Home Office responsibility.
Hmm. What is Gove? What's his actual title? Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, which basically means he's got free rein to stick his finger into any pie that he so chooses.
And did you also hear about Dominic Cummings?
Apparently,
he went across to the cabinet office. He's going to clear out a section of the cabinet office because they're overcrowded at number 10. So he hadn't got enough room for all his staff at number 10.
well, I mean, the Dominic Cummings thing is beyond a joke. You know, we got out of Europe because of these unelected bureaucrats.
And now we've got another elected bureaucrat running the entire country.
It's hilarious.
Hmm.
Wrong kind of bureaucrats, obviously.
Aye. Well, it's delicious that nobody's quite pointed out that irony to the UK populace. I'm quite surprised that the UK press just didn't run with that day after day after day, but I'm assuming that they don't, because they would get no access whatsoever to anything in London if they did.
Can we slip back to, I think it was the Wings article that talked about, oh no, sorry, it wasn't. It was Craig Murray's article that talked about this missing piece of information, not evidence, because it wasn't given, it wasn't allowed into court as evidence. And he's moaning that it can't be made available to him by the Crown Office for his defence. This is a question I'd like to put out to other people who know about this stuff. It doesn't appear to me to be logical to expect the Crown Office to hold bits of paper that weren't evidence. So I can kind of go with, well, we don't have this piece of paper. And I would have thought the person Craig Murray should approach is Alex Salmond's lawyer, because I would imagine he would have it as he wanted it produced as evidence.
I'd agree with you, Norry, but I would have expected them to hang on to it purely because it did exist. Clearly it existed, because if it was presented to the court and the judge decided that it wasn't admissible as evidence, there will be a record of that somewhere. And they knew that there was a before the case even happened, they knew there was a parliamentary inquiry and a judicial review upcoming after the case. So no pieces of evidence, no information, regardless of whether it was used in the court case, should have been destroyed at this point. But then that's just me thinking, as a taxi driver, nothing should have been destroyed prior to these inquiries. I could be completely wrong there.
Well, I mean, evidence is held for a given length of time.
Yeah, but mistakes are made.
Sure. I'm sorry. This piece of paper should be in Salmond's lawyer's files.
Apparently it is. According to Craig Murray's piece, it is, but he needs Crown Office approval to release it to Craig Murray, which, if it's particularly useful to Craig Murray, you'd imagine the Crown Office won't approve Alex Salmond's lawyer to giving it to him.
Oh yeah, but if it's vital for Craig Murray's defence, then that's really shocking.
Aye, but it's not unusual for a government either to withhold evidence or not even to withhold it, but it's not unusual for a government not to produce evidence that is unhelpful to their case.
I thought we'd covered at the point earlier on in this part of the discussion that the Crown Office and the Procurator Fiscal Services, a law advocate and the Justice Secretary essentially are nothing to do with the government.
They shouldn't be. They should be totally independent of government, or totally independent of government influence is probably more accurate.
But that's clearly what Craig Murray is hinting is not the case in his piece. I don't know. I think he's maybe under a lot of stress at the moment. I read that article, and I've only read it the once, but I read that and thought, oh, he's a bit under the cosh here, and he may be making a couple of assumptions that aren't quite 100% bang on.
Can I turn this on its head a moment? Let's presume that the Scottish Government are totally innocent in all this. And what we have is, at the top of our system of law, a cabal of unionists who know full well by manipulating this situation, the people that are going to suffer politically are the SNP. Now, if the SNP didn't interfere, it looks like they did because of the actions of these people. If the SNP did interfere, it's what people who don't like the idea of independence lap up.
Well, I'm not saying who, but one of the people whose names we've discussed today has suggested that the intelligence services might be involved in the Crown Office.
Yeah, the entire thing could be, like Norry's suggesting, the entire thing.
Norry suggested Unionist, which could be just...
Well, mate, if you're in the intelligence service, you're not going to be an independentist, are you?
Oh, I know, it's part of your job is to defend the union, clearly. Same as working for the BBC.
Well, I mean, that's my point. I mean, there's an awful lot of people who are looking at it on the simple, yeah, the Scottish Government must have had a finger in this pie. But the fact that the pie exists was always going to dent an SNP government.
Well, the timing is exquisite for those of a unionist bent. Given where opinion polls are, given where we are in the electoral cycle, the timing is awfully useful. And I think we'd be mugs to think that the intelligence services aren't up to their neck in certain things that happen in Scotland. And certainly, I would say most of the senior legal profession in Scotland are unionists, just because of where their political. I know they're not meant to give away political opinions and what have you, mate. But I've been in the new club. I hear what these people say to each other, and there's no many people of a independence-minded that sit in the higher echelons, sit in the new club, drinking their G&Ts, discussing the day's events. You didn't find many independentistas in there.
Is it actually going to make the slightest bit of difference to the Holyrood election results?
I don't think so, if I'm honest. We'll have to wait and see. As I say, there's going to be all kinds of crap flying about, and you never know. These things, Norry, sometimes when you have inquiries like this, sometimes it's not the headline issue that becomes the biggest issue. Sometimes it's a wee thing that comes out of left field that could absolutely blow something apart.
Also, we've got to take in, Jimmy, we've also got to take into account that we're now in an era where our leading politicians all lie all the time, and they're corrupt. They give contracts to their friends, and they have sexual adventures that they get away with. The public are used to this now. So what could be shocking from this inquiry?
I think there is something that we should make note of. The SNP is held to a higher standard, both by themselves and by the media. What wouldn't be a blip on a Tory bedspread is a big issue
Tory bedspread
to the SNP.
A good one.
I think you're right, mate. Aye, they do. They've always held themselves to that higher standard, and they've always said they have to hold themselves to that standard because the media and their opponents who have control of the media will hold them to a ridiculously high standard. So they've got to do it. I
mean, look at the number of people. Well, there's been 3 now. SNP politicians are basically out the party or lost their jobs over things, in 2 cases that they were totally innocent of, and in 1 case it was an automatic texting mistake.
Yeah, you're right. As I say, mate, we don't know where this is going to lead, where it's going to go. It's interesting that I think the whole thing has been kicked off by Angus Robertson yesterday deciding that he was going to declare his candidacy and start his campaigning to win the candidacy for Edinburgh Central. Now, I've no idea why he chose to do that, given that apparently there was an agreement made that campaigning would start next month and the decisions would be taken in September. So the bold Angus has decided to jump the gun, but what I think he also did was fire the starting pistol for, I mean, this must be what, SNP Civil War 422 or something like that. So he's released a video yesterday having a pop at Joanna Cherry, because she's also wanting to stand in that seat. And everything leads from there.
Well, Joanna Cherry has said today that she's not going to start campaigning yet. She's decided not to take part.
Well, I think it's interesting that they feel the need to run campaigns publicly, not within the SNP membership.
Aye, given that it's a very, I mean, I don't know what the size of the branch of Edinburgh Central is, but it's a pretty small electorate that they're speaking to.
It's
So,
a strange branch.
yeah, but for there to be an online video yesterday, and also Angus is asking for donations. You know, have you ever known anybody standing who wanted to get a candidacy who's asked for donations to their campaign? I mean, what is this? Is this an American primary or something? They're just not telling us.
That's kind of the question I was asking. I don't understand why it has to be such a high profile. Sorry about this, guys. Why it has to be such a high profile issue. When it's an internal SNP decision.
So why did Angus go early is another question you've kind of subtly suggested, Jimmy. Why did he go early?
I don't know, mate.
Why does he want money?
I've no idea. I mean, I'm assuming that, I can't remember how long he was an MP, but he was pretty well, he was pretty nicely remunerated whilst he was an MP, and he's now managing director of Progress Scotland, who got a big wedgie SNP money to produce very little information, really, particularly in the last election campaign. They didn't put out the kind of polls and the breakdown of other people's polls I was expecting from this organisation that was set up in a blaze of publicity.
Angus's reputation in the party is as this superb tactician when it comes to campaigning. We're just wondering, you know, why does he need to be back in say Holyrood, where he wants to be now, isn't it? I
can understand why he wants to be in Holyrood, because Holyrood's where things are going to happen over the next few years.
Yeah, well, that's what more or less what everybody's saying, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I do think that we'd be better with Angus in Holyrood and Joanna Cherry in Westminster at the moment. I think she's better suited to Westminster and he's better suited to Holyrood. Personal view, I think Sturgeon needs a little bit more backup that can go on the telly. And Angus, Angus is a good performer on the box.
And I thought I'd heard this the other day, but it was definitely confirmed today that Michael Russell, as he's preferred to be called now, is not standing again, which is a big disappointment.
Yeah, I knew that.
He's no spring chicken, the bold Mike, is he?
Yeah.
I can understand. And also, I would have thought Mike's got, there are some strictures of being an MSP that the minute he's not an MSP, Michael can let himself go. In fact, he can
write the book.
He could write the book, but he could also, he's got every single newspaper man's phone number will be in Mike's phone. Anything he wants to say is going to appear in the press the next again day, and maybe he's got a few things to say.
Well, I look forward to his book on the negotiations for Brexit.
His opinions on some of the people he's had to work with, particularly over the few years, are going to make for great reading. You're right.
I can just imagine the agreement between British government and Scottish government chapter. It'll be half a page.
Aye. Yeah, I think he'll take a baseball bat to a few reputations down in Westminster.
Oh,
That's for
I
sure.
do. I think he will. I do think he will. Right, guys. I think we'll call it a day at that, unless anybody's got a funny.
Have I? Nah. We discovered, what else did we discover? Somebody ran a poll about, did the Russians interfere? Do they believe the Russians interfered with a series of 4 different elections? And apparently the most recent election, 2019, the majority, that was top of the poll. Yes, most people believed in that, was over 50%. Whereas they were asked about Scottish referendum, and that most people, it was only 40% believed that.
Right. Okay.
But one thing for sure we do know, the Russians may or may not have interfered in the Scottish referendum election, but the British government did.
Right. That's what you were setting it up for. Okay. I couldn't understand where you were going with that.
Now you know.
Yeah. Just for the English interfered line. Okay, guys. Thank you, Stuart Lockhead.
Cheerio.
Jimmy Hutton. And I'm Norry Stewart, and we'll catch you tomorrow, guys. Cheers for now.